being the time and place of the Board of Trustees regular annual meeting. I call the meeting to order. Period. Please.
Johnson. Here. Kamal. Here. Plenty.
Here.
Pantera. Wisniewski.
Here.
4 board members present. Pantera absent.
I would like to do a couple introductions. First, I'd like to introduce Zoe Clifford. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet her before. She is our Public Works Facility Project Coordinator. You'll see a lot of her work in my director update with the first floor planning. And then we also may be calling on her. She's been heavily involved in some of the classroom exercise that we're doing for the facility plan. So she may get the opportunity to be our phone a friend when we have a in-depth question from you. And then I'm also really thrilled. Hannah Schulnick is our branch manager at this location. I'd love for you to welcome us.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here and welcome. It's so nice to see this space like used with people and everything like that. So yeah, thank you. I think that we get you guys a few more times next fall. You guys are doing stuff, so it's exciting. Yeah, and I explore some restaurants and whatnot too after this.
Hey, next on the agenda is communications, and I think as we all know, we got a number of emails and letters from our citizens in support of a library in West Boise, and I want to acknowledge that we will take those up as during our discussion as part of the facility plan update later in the agenda. But I want to thank community members for sharing their thoughts with us.
And let me just add, we published the packet on Friday. We had 3 additional communications to the board. Since then, they are printed in front of you. So that would be, those are the ones that came in after Friday's publishing of the packet and before today's meeting.
Thank you for that. And that will move on to the minutes.
Oh, Jessica, have these been added to the file where there's a meeting on the website? If we download the meeting materials, we'll have these in the packet.
I don't know how it works, but we can, but is that in an
You can.
or we can publish them in the next board meeting?
We do an amended.
Amended packet?
Including like correspondence.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. So, does everybody get a chance to look at the minutes of the August 13th meeting and your motion to approve them? What changes that are?
I wasn't here, so I don't think I had to make the motion, but I did read and listen to the video, watch the video.
It's from the August 13th meeting.
Since moved and seconded, roll call, please.
Johnson.
Yes.
Kamal. Yes. Plenty.
Yes.
Wisniewski.
Yes.
All in favor. Motion.
Okay. Next up is the consent agenda. As a reminder, all matters on the consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved in a single motion. Any trustee may ask to have an item removed from the consent agenda, considered separately. If anyone would like to have anything removed from the consent agenda?
No, I did have one comment for people new to the city's budgeting process. It takes a little getting used to. There's an account type on the sheet we have in front of us. And on the last page, there's account type 600,000 called capital project. And you can see that we have had a budget of $6.5 million. And we're probably going to end the year with 5.7 of that remaining. Seems extraordinary. How do you miss a budget by that much? But we knew it in advance. This is one of the peculiarities of the city's budgeting process. The money is carrying over for all the work that's starting in September. And it looks odd, but just normal.
Yeah, and to clarify, it looks like this was printed in July and we have executed our contract with CMCO for the first floor remodel. So I imagine the next print will show this as a less amount.
Thank you for that clarification. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. There's no other changes. There were never what changes. But there's no other.
We approve the consent agenda.
Roll call.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kamal,
Yes.
Buddy,
Yes.
Kuznetsky,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carried.
Very good. So can't really see up on the screen because there's sand across the top. But my assumption is that, yes, there we go. Okay, so we have today a report from the Friends of the Boise Public Library, and Vicki is here representing the Friends today. Are you there, Vicki?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Thank
hi.
you.
Thank you for welcoming me. I think you're pretty low down on the board of directors when you get me. So this is my first opportunity to be here. Just wanted to update you that we have settled nicely into our routine in our new bookstore. If you haven't had a chance to come by and see our window display on Fulton Street, it's apparently quite popular. If you are not our Instagram friend, we do have a board member who is media savvy, so we are quite popular on Insta. We are having a book by the bag sale on October 25th with children's books, so that's kind of exciting. And our next sale will be November 13th through 16th. And we are exploring using our shared space with the Shakespeare Festival in our Fulton Street space. So it's really good opportunities there. So we're enjoying that space. So that's really all I have. So thank you for inviting us. And so that's all I really have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Vicki. Any questions for Vicki? Hearing none, we will move on to Camille Franks and the report from the Boise Public Library Foundation. Morning.
Thank
Camille.
you. Hi, good morning, everyone. For our update this month, I am pleased to share that the foundation had a great time selling shirts and stickers and posters at this year's Boise Comic Arts Fest, or BCAF. Our gross sales were just under $1,300, and the opportunity to promote library support was terrific. This year, we also had a profit share arrangement with Rediscovered Books. Rediscovered supplied the books of BCAF creators, and the foundation sold them. We had a booth where we held book signings, which were very popular. And as of this morning, we have not yet received the final amount of the foundation's portion of the proceeds, and we'll report out on that at a future date. So we're really happy with the outcome of the foundation's participation in this year's BCAF. Any questions?
Camille, on the materials, there's a gift received for from the Boise Public Library Foundation of $100,000. And is there anything particularly significant about that?
I believe that was for the Gloth Family Foundation, the 100,000.
That's correct, Camille.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Camille. Appreciate that report. And that takes us to Jessica's report.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to everyone this morning. A couple things I want to talk to you about. First, I want to share or sort of highlight for you some information that was in your packet about the library's in-service day in October. So on Monday, October 13th, we will be closed to the public for that in-service day. This will be the second in-service day that we've done. We had been paused sort of after, during COVID, picked it back up last year, heard from staff how much they appreciated the opportunity to meet each other, to work together, to learn more about working with other departments or other locations to improve their skills, and then really to recharge and reflect. So we will have that on Monday, October 13th. Next week, you will get an invitation to that, which will have some of the interactive agenda. You are welcome to stay for the whole day, part of the day. Last year, I know we assigned you welcoming in the morning to join staff in a sort of casual atmosphere. Absolutely welcome for you to join again for breakfast and to meet people. I know, Ron, you at least stay for some of the sessions. We'll give you the agenda so you can decide if it works for your schedule and what you'd like to attend. But really appreciative of a day where we get practical learning that we can immediately put into action. And then I'm really excited to share with you everything that happened last week at the downtown library. As you remember, we came to you and asked to close the entire building in preparation for the first floor renovation project. I am going to thank and praise the amazing teamwork that went into a massive move. We literally touched every single book in the library multiple times. So I have put together a couple of little slides. Okay. We marveled walking through the library really on an hourly basis, watching it change.
So it's not gonna go.
Okay. I think this is a slide deck that's going to start with our mission, because I love grounding all my presentations in how our mission is to provide access and opportunity for everyone by connecting to ideas, information, and community. The next slide shows the goals of that first floor investment, creating a welcoming space for everyone. We're removing that circulation desk, adding a new circ desk, installing family accessible restrooms and new services. And they're really prioritized children growing up in the library and making expandable, flexible spaces that'll meet the needs that we have today and in the future. So when we closed the library, we immediately put up this why board for staff, because we were asking staff to do a considerable amount of work, and we wanted to remind them of why we were doing it. And so you see pictures of kids in the library, you see pictures from our day of the farewell to the first floor party, people who talked about, you know, here's the kids that we're making sure we're doing this for. And then there were lots of snacks because we gotta stay motivated the whole time. And so here's some of the planning that went on the left side. This is literally a day-by-day breakdown of everything that needed to happen, and all the teams that had different roles. The week before we did this closure, we literally had a dress rehearsal where every team from our IT, facilities, library members, everybody sat down and walked through and blocked everything out, even from like who's using the elevator at certain times to who's making sure that we're tracking. And you can see this was where things were going. The next group that was really moved in was our facilities group, and they started some of the major pieces that we needed to get done. Yeah. So one of the first things we did is took off the doors of the Idaho room. I'm going to show you a slide later on in the deck where we've got the new view of what it looks like, because this is where new services we're moving into. Also took the doors off of the Bingham room. I'll show you that as well. And then the next group that came in really was our IT group, which needed to obviously break down, remove all the computers so we could make sure we were moving those first. And then a huge amount of work was done by our ATS team to make sure that all the books that were being moved would stay in the order, so that when they were put back on the shelves, they would be, we would be able to make sure that the person who was taking them off the shelves, putting them on a cart, and then we could put them back on a shelf, would keep them in order. It was mostly successful. Our science fiction section got a little squirrely, and we're not sure why, but it might be the genre. And so you see these labels throughout the library, and here's staff putting them literally in between the shelving, so that we were making sure that we were tracking all the books and where they were going. And it wasn't just labeling of books, it was labeling of furniture. So on Sunday night, we had staff that came in and put up, okay, here's the chair that right now is on the first floor. So you saw it up on the wall. This is where that chair needs to move. So when the movers were ready for the furniture, they were just matching up pieces to where they needed to go. And then we literally just started emptying shelves. We had to empty all the shelves on the third floor and second floor so that we could do a big sort there. And so you'll see we at one point we had everything pulled off, and this is why I said we touched everything, and we touched it multiple times, and it went onto carts that were then wheeled. You can see, how we're keeping track of the books and what order they needed to be in. And things just had to move around and move around. And then we started putting them back on the shelves. It was a massive undertaking. And we really want to thank the community for being so accommodating of us. We did see an increase in our other library locations. People came in and talked about, yep, I'm coming here. I think Hillcrest in particular had more people than usual and said, yep, coming to a different library because the downtown library is closed. So really wanted to thank the community for hanging in there with us, and they're really with us now. We opened back. This is a shot I took of the library just before Monday at 10 a.m. when we opened back up. These are the doors that are now closed. Construction is behind that. So what we've done is we put a greeter to help people. This is our very own who is helping people. It is amazing how easy it is to just walk through and not even see that entrance on the left side. So really want to thank our CE team that did some really beautiful signage for us as well, which you can see in some of these photos. So this is how you get into the library. And we are sending people up the staircase. Follow the butterflies. They will take you to the second and third floor. We've got signage color coded in terms of what's on what floors. And when you get to the top of the third floor, particularly if you are looking for youth services, after you follow the butterflies, then you follow the stars on the carpet. And so this is what some of it looks like right now. The view on the left, that is the Bingham room. So that is normally where our board meetings are, and obviously we are not in a board meeting here today. It has been turned into a really cozy reading nook for the large print collection. Fit really nicely in there with some couches and some chairs. And then you can see that continued signage. The colors is color coded. So this is where you can find newspapers, this is where I can find molds. And we do have greeters on second and third floors right now to also help people navigate, since it is a big change. Here's what the second floor looks like. We have relocated the computers to the west side of the building, and the fiction is really right when you come up the stairs. And one last, because we got asked this question quite frequently, the baby's shopping carts made the move. They're up on the third floor. I know lots of people were worried about that. They were there. When I took this picture yesterday, one of the shopping carts was in use, so I only have two of the shopping carts, but they are all there. And then we have in the Idaho room is really where our youth services is. You can see we've got play structures, we've got board books, we've got games, and then the teen section is really where more of our government documents used to be. So huge thank you to everyone on the project team who did the planning, who did the work. And now a big thank you particularly to our public services team that is working together in new ways. We've got people mixed on the floor. All staff I watch them walk around with a little post-it note. They're writing down their questions. We're figuring out the space and really tweaking it as we get used to it and the public gets used to it. I did want to call out, this really is just a massive investment in that building. I'm really excited about what it will bring for us. One of the things I'm very excited about is we don't have this anymore. These are 3 different views in the library of what happens, I think, when you don't do a major renovation project with the care that our public works team is doing. We were very excited last year to get the movable shelving because we thought that would bring us some flexibility in the particular middle pictures use services. As you can see, when we pulled the previous shelving, we found sort of the excavation level of other carpet, and we could only put the new shelving right back on where the old shelving was, because we had real concerns about tripping hazards. And so we're gonna make sure that the quality of work that is done in this renovation, we won't have floors that look like this. When we talk about having a flexible space and adaptability and quality work, that this won't happen again. One thing that I am excited about that's happening right now is you can see we're pulling some of the current work, some of the current wood that is in some of the built-ins or the offices, and that'll be repurposed for the new staircase. So I think one of the things that's been really great about working with Public Works is their commitment to reusing materials when possible. And so the group that's in that section right now before any of the demo happens is the group that is salvaging as much of that wood as we can use. So this is what it looked like 2 weeks ago, just before that all started. So this is the view, as you've seen this slide many times, you'll continue to see it. This is what it looked like 2 weeks ago. This is what it looked like yesterday. Oh, yeah, everything pulled out, and this is what we're going to build towards. Any questions on that week?
Just a comment, when I was last in the library, before the new stairwell and elevator were opened up to the public, I tried them out and set off the alarm. And I had to go find someone and said, let's remember to turn off the door alarm. And we opened to the public. That was my contribution.
We haven't set off the alarm this week, so you got that for us. Thank you.
So what are the initial feedback from the public after touring it?
Well, I think the feedback we've heard has been appreciative and positive, and thinking, oh, yep, that was a lot of work. Every once in a while, that door is open, and because we were still, the big carts, the moving company came and picked them up yesterday, and so every once in a while, the public gets to look in and says, "Wow, that was a lot of work." But we're getting really good feedback on the refigured spaces. I think a lot of grace in terms of like figuring out where stuff is. There are things that are behind. There are some things that used to be on the floor that people could browse that now you can't. The entire admin office has some of the 900s, our government documents, our maps. So there are more things that people are going to have to interact with the staff member about. But staff are doing a lot of tours to make sure they know where everything is. So when they're asked to pull something, they can get it. And I think people are appreciative that we're gonna, as you saw from that first picture, we have up for people when you walk in, you can see what's going on behind the closed doors, and I think people are excited about that, what the potential will be when it's all done.
Questions? Do I need to acknowledge?
Jerry will add it to the minutes.
Because
We can say welcome.
welcome. Sorry, being so next on the agenda is request for reconsideration of standing item, and again this month we have no requests for reconsideration, which is nice to see, and I think we have it for several months now. So that's great. And in light of all the other things on the agenda, there is no educational items. Well, so that takes us to the library facilities plan update. Would you go ahead and make your presentation?
Jerry, can you pull up the next slide? So I want to thank you. We're continuing the conversation actually that we've been having for the last year or so, and wanted to really build on the conversation we had in August. We left with Lindsay and I left with some homework to do from that conversation, so we're bringing that back to you and want to really continue the conversation that we're having. So this slide deck starts, as they all do, with the mission of the Boise Public Library. If you just want to skip to slide 3. Thanks, Carrie. See if I can, I'll let you do that and then I'll, can I do it?
Now try.
Oh, great. Okay. So we're developing this facility plan to ensure that all our libraries are welcoming, accessible, attractive and comfortable space for the community. It builds on our 2023 strategic plan and really focusing on how we can improve the buildings that we have for the next 10 to 20 years, bringing to life our library spaces that all Boise residents love to visit and use. This is also the first facility plan that has been done since the completion of the branch libraries. So we have factored that into and we'll build on that, some of that today as well. So as I said, my goals for today's discussion, continuing our discussion as a board about the strat plan. I'm going to review the areas identified for additional information during our August meeting with you. And then we are building for that joint work session with the Boise City Council on Tuesday, October 12th. And obviously want to capture any additional questions for consideration or for research from you as well. And as a reminder, here is how we got to the facilities plan. Starting with that needs assessment with group 4, working on strategies, plan, and really focused on our stakeholder and community engagement, particularly some of those library board of trustees involvement, and then the multiple council and board work sessions. So when we left the August meeting, there were 3 areas that we took away for homework for today's discussion that I want to share with you. The first one was a little bit more understanding about the usage of other Links Library Consortium libraries by Boise cardholders. So we asked the Links Consortium to pull some data for you on that. More information on Prop 1, the 2019 voter initiative, requiring a public vote for a library project expected to exceed 25 million. So we've got that, and then cost estimates for some of the potential projects that were identified by Group 4, and that's when I mentioned some of the work that Public Works has been doing to make sure we're using local estimates. So on the Links Library Consortium usage, as you all know, we don't track when somebody comes into the library what library card they're bringing with them. So we used library checkouts as an indicator of usage. Because we can track if somebody comes into a library and uses their card to check out a book, what card they're bringing in and what library they're in. And I have 2 slides on this. Ron looked at them; they're confusing, so let me walk you through them. So the first slide I want to show you is a view of checkouts at Links Consortium libraries by Boise cardholders. And we just captured a week. We looked at July 20th through the 26th of this year. Did what Group 4 did by picking a week that didn't have a holiday or something weird that we thought would be in it. So just typical week in July of this year, we had 5,413 checkouts by Boise cardholders. So almost 80% of the time, a Boise cardholder is in a Boise library, so one of our locations. But you can see the number of checkouts and the percentage of checkouts we had in those Links libraries. So 3 people were at Twin Falls and checked out at least 1 book there, 27 people in Nampa, 1 person went to Mountain Home. So you can see sort of where that breakdown is. So 80% of the time we're a Boise Public Library person checked out a Boise Public Library book in a Boise Public Library. But 7% were in an Ada library, 3% in Eagle, 6% in Garden City, and 4% in Meridian. Any questions on that?
The libraries closest to West Boise that are not Boise Public Library are Ada Community, Garden City, and CUNA. Is that correct?
Meridian.
Meridian.
Okay.
Say Eagle, Garden City, Meridian.
Eagle, Garden City, Meridian. Okay.
Ada.
And Boise cardholders going can not only check out materials, but can participate in any sort of programs or events or things like that? Or
It depends on the program or event. So for instance, if you wanted to go to a story time, that is something where, they're posted, people go there. I think like something like a summer reading program, you would be doing the summer reading program at the library that you have a card associated with.
okay.
So it does depend on the program or event. Any other questions? So then the next piece was same week, looking at how many people from Link's library, so non-Boise libraries, came to a Boise library to check out a book. And so this is where the number of Boise Public Library people stays the same. It's still 4,284. But what changes is people that were coming into a Boise library. So in this case, we had 80 people with an Ada community library card that came into a Boise library. We had 122 people from Eagle come into a Boise Public Library, 26 people from Garden City, 74 from Meridian, 23 from Nampa, and then 10 Caldwell, 2 Emmett, CUNA 4, Mountain Home 4, and Twin Falls 2. So you really see the influence of geography in that movement. So we had 93% of the time someone's checking out a book in a Boise Public Library. It's a Boise Public Library card for that week.
So a relatively decent difference between Boise cardholders using other libraries versus other library cardholders using Boise facilities, this being 93% versus 79%.
That's a good question. Didn't do the math on if we have 5,400 people.
I was just looking at
Yeah,
percentages
you're looking at
on the side.
percentage.
So basically 93% of the time it's Boise people using Boise libraries, and 2% of the time it's Ada community people using Boise libraries. But if you do the flip, Boise people are more often using other communities' libraries versus the other way around. Again, looking at those 3 or 4 ones, there tend to be a fair number of those libraries closest to the geography.
I do think one thing that we, and I think you pointed this out, by having the Boise number in it, it may be a little misleading because we don't have the other checkouts. We don't know how much Ada checked out of Ada libraries,
Right.
So it is a little harder. But in terms of usage, we see people moving back and forth both ways. We're serving people from other libraries, and our cardholders are being served by other libraries as well.
And to be clear, these are people who go into the library and check something out, not folks who just say, I want to do a whole, and wherever the library is, then they deliver it to my local library.
Yeah, but this is actual checkouts from that.
Physically going to the library, check.
Yeah. And I think we looked at what our door count was for that week, and this is where, since we don't have any way of actually tracking foot traffic by card, I asked what was our door count for that week at our 5 locations. We had a door count, 14,000 people come in. So that there is, a lot of, so our 5 locations of that week had 14,227 people walking the building. So using the card is one indicator. And I think it is illustrative, but it also is limited.
Any other questions about these 2 sets?
All right, now, so the second thing I want to talk about is Proposition 1. This is important, I think, because
Sorry, that's
wow.
editorial. Stop.
Proposition 1 predates me as the director of Boise Public Library, and also predates anybody that was on the board. So this is new information for all of us, still working through it. But on November 5th, 2019, Boise voters considered a citizen initiative to require voter approval before the city spends more than $25 million on a library development project. The measure was put to the ballot through a citizens initiative petition led by Boise Working Together. They have to meet a minimum number of signatures, 20% to put that on the ballot. They clearly were above that. So it was brought to the voters on November 5th. And I actually, in front of you, there is a handout. It's a 2-sided handout. On one side is the actual ballot wording that was put to the community. It's here on the slide, but I thought it would be hard to read. So we also have a handout for you. The Proposition 1 passed. Here was the yes and no vote wording taken directly from the voter pamphlet. A yes vote meant the city of Boise could not undertake any aspect of a library project with expected cost of $25 million or more without first obtaining approval by a majority of Boise voters in a future election. No vote meant current law would not change. The city of Boise could undertake any aspect of a library project without first obtaining voter approval. And as you see, there was a 69% percentage of Boise voters voted to approve this in that election. And that is 35,545 people voted in favor of this proposition. So then once that's passed, then it needed to be adopted by City Council as an ordinance. So on July 28th, 2020, Boise City Council passed an ordinance to officially adopt the ballot measure. This is in the middle of COVID, so I don't think anyone remembers it, to be honest. And it also is interesting in terms of who was on City Council. That election in November was when Jimmy Halliburton was elected to council, and that was when then City Council member McLean was elected mayor. And since then, nobody there. When that ordinance was adopted, the only current council member who was part of passing that ordinance is Councilmember Halliburton. The other 5 current city council members predate that passage. And talking to people that were involved from the city, in the putting together the wording for city code, there was some work that needed to be done to address concerns from city legal staff that the way the ballot measure was written, it would require that a requirement that city or library staff could not spend any money or staff time on a library project before it was approved. So those slight wording changes between the ballot And the ordinance was done so that the city and the library could spend staff time and some funds to actually put together what would need to go to the voters. Again, that predates me, but I think that was an important work that was done, because there wouldn't be any, if you couldn't spend any staff time to put something to the voters, there would be no way to put something to the voters. So I have slides, and we also, on the flip side of your handout, you have the city code that was actually what was approved on July 28th. And so it's got these sections that you'll see. What's the purpose? The election approval was required since of that vote. Disclosure and plan to design proposals, approval and definitions. And so I want to just call out a couple things that I think are important in this. The purpose, council put some thinking behind what was that intent of the vote. The intent is more public involvement, more public support, and a better result. So you see how that was called out in the ordinance. They adopted some of the wording, not incur any expense for a construction or any additional aspect of a major library project unless the City Council of Boise has received the approval of qualified electors of the City of Boise at a duly conducted election. So this shows we need to have voter approval. This is the piece about the schematic design and a funding strategy for any major library project shall be disclosed in the notice of the election. So going forward, voters would need to see would need to see the design and the strategy for funding it. Talk more about that. How you would have approval, you would have a majority of votes cast in favor on an election held on an official election date. So how you would get something approved. And then here's some of the definitions that I think are important. What are the expenses that are included in this? Any monetary payments, in-kind assistance, the value of any land exchanges, direct or indirect payments to third parties, or any other consideration which promotes or enhances the development of a major library project. So that is everything that would need to go as part of the project to be approved by the voters. As you can see, there is the change. Expenses shall not include any city incurred costs for the development of a schematic design. So that, when I talked about that little modification that was made. The funding strategy. So the plan method of any financing mechanism that will be utilized. Major library project, any library project reasonably expected to require expenses totaling not less than $25 million. And then what is the schematic design is also identified. The studies and the requirements of the project, the drawings, the documents illustrating the scale, sort of when you think about sort of the blueprints that a major project would have to be part of that design.
Can I ask a question, please? Help me understand how we would navigate putting a proposal to voters with a schematic design when we don't have land. Because as city council, I don't want to spend a few $100,000 designing a library in the abstract that can't be applied to a particular parcel. When I think about the parcels that we do have that are 3 acres, not being big enough, the idea that we can go out and find a 4, 5, or 6 acre parcel along State Street or in this part of town and then design something in the abstract without having first acquired that property, that seems contrary to how we do other public works projects. I mean, what I think about is like we might land bank space for a fire station years, if not decades, before we actually build a fire station there. Has there been any consideration at Public Works or legal or the library for land acquisition prior to? I don't want to pay to design something in the abstract before we put it to voters.
Council President Nash, you have hit on I think an unintended consequence that strategy, which was how we were able to purchase land, full and use stick and bound crossing is not something that we can do under this ordinance.
So I don't know if the library staff or public works or legal or some of the board is prepared to make some type of recommendation to council in our October meeting regarding that provision. But I just can say, I don't know. I want to follow the intent of this law, which is, I think if we're spending $25 million in the library, we get public consent, but I don't know how to act consistently with that in like a responsible manner with that.
I believe that is the conversation that board and council need to have in October, because we don't. Yeah, I so appreciate everything you've said. We want to honor the voter intent, and the way the ordinance is written, it very clearly includes the land within that $25 million project.
And you referenced the fact, and this is just a question I have no insight knowledge of. You referenced that in the past you had already owned a piece of ground, and or you acquire ground but not necessarily know what's going to happen with it. Is it as if you absolutely know, oh, we're going to use it for a school, we're going to use it for a fire station, et cetera. We just think this is an appropriate thing for the city to own. I mean, I suppose you could acquire land. With an abstract, we wanted to have some multiple purpose use in the future, perhaps a fire station, perhaps a low-income housing, perhaps a library, perhaps all of those things combined in a multi-use facility without specifically identifying it as a library. Maybe, this is a question perhaps for legal, maybe that's a way to do it. It's an odd thing for the city to acquire land, not knowing what it's going to use it for in advance, except to know that it's an ideal location for multiple city needs.
I think
that's a bit of a way to skirt the specific intent of the law, but on the other hand, it may be your only option.
I mean, we have the right to amend the ordinance. And I think I would probably err on the side of transparency when it comes to something like that. But I mean, I would defer to Public Works on examples. I'm thinking of Northwest Boise, where we acquire a piece of property. We think we're going to do a fire station. We end up swapping for a park, and we put the fire station further west. I mean, these are the types of examples of acquisitions that we've done years in advance. And sometimes it just takes a long time for the financing to come together, which is something else we.
Well, that's an upcoming slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at Proposition 1, which then became Title I, Chapter 27 of the Boise City Code, we have to factor this into any implementation plan of the library. Want to bring it to the board, want to bring it to city council because it is very challenging. Any library project with expenses over 25 million must be approved by voters. And when we look at some of the early findings as we're trying to understand how to work with this requirement, some of the things that are not addressed in the ordinance is a library project system-wide investments. If you start doing multiple things, does that add up? That co-locating of services that you mentioned, maybe the library is on a ground floor of something, but the overall project is a certain amount. Escalation over time was a question that came up last meeting. That's not factored into as well. And the funding piece, I think, is also really challenging. What we believe requires, as written, 2 votes from the public. One to meet that requirement of Proposition 1, where voters approve the project. That's a simple majority. We need to identify a funding mechanism. That's a bond, and a vote for a bond, it requires a supermajority, and they can't be on the same ballot, is my understanding. So we've got some real, we have some real thinking to do on this, and I think this is why we want to make sure we spend time with this as a board, and then we will spend time with that joint work session, since it's new to you and definitely also new to most of city council as well.
Did I take away from the last meeting that the cost to build new, either of the two city-owned branches would likely exceed $25 million, not including the land.
Would you like to move to the facility cost estimates part of the conversation? Or Brian has absolutely transitioned us. If there are other questions on this.
We should first pause before we get into that and ask if anybody has any questions about the ordinances themselves, the measure, the proposition that's passed.
I would just offer to the board that I think you have a council that wants to honor the intent of what happened in 2019, but also make it workable. So make your recommendations to us accordingly.
Thank you.
Hearing no other questions or comments, shall we move on to the cost estimate.
Cost estimates. Okay, so you have before you a appendix, and this was created. This came from Group 4. I mentioned this, I think, in our August meeting about some of the work that we were still doing, where Group 4 and this ACC cost consultants really created a model for how we could use local costs to do projected estimates. So they put together the framework. Our public works team took that, and then based on our current market, our what are similar projects of comparable size within the Boise market. So hiring Boise laborers, using the city public works process. So this is where these are where these costs come from. I know how nervous Lindsay is right now about this part of the discussion because of how volatile construction costs are right now and how hard they are to estimate. So she has spent a lot of time with me really making sure that we've got a good estimate of where we are today, but want to recognize how much of the current construction market is beyond our control. Labor costs, availability of contractors, materials, equipment, tariffs, these are all things that are really changing quite rapidly. And so that escalation, you normally build in a flat escalation to all parts of a project over time. We have actually recommending different contingency rates, different escalation rates based on the type of costs that they are. So you'll see a little bit of that in some of the materials we've provided. But that was, we're just seeing such rapid growth in some of those costs and need to make sure we're accounting for them. Putting things together, we have additional information for facilities planning. We've got for right now for each current location. One of the things we really, like I mentioned, this is the first long-term facility plan where we have those branches that we need to keep up. So we've got recommended ongoing maintenance and location refresh costs for all our current locations. And then we have cost estimates for expanded or new facilities. And this came directly out of the recommendations and August discussion. So what would be our cost estimates for an expanded Hollister or Hillcrest facility, a new standalone city-owned branch library, i.e. an additional Cole and Ustick or Town Crossing, something that we own the land, own the building.
Right. Is that in the Hollister Hillcrest regions or just anywhere?
This would be anywhere. Yeah. These were the options that Jill described last month, where expanding Hollister and Hillcrest because you have some of the savings because you're not starting from scratch. You've got some of the stuff, you've got some of the materials already in place. So expanding those, this will be a new standalone location entirely. We've got cost estimates for that, and then a new leased library as well.
And just an aside, the recommendations, as I recall from the consultant, was that we should not do anything new, whether it's expanding or acquiring or leasing, that isn't at least 25,000 square feet, because that, in their estimate, is the minimum for the size city that we have now in terms of a branch wire, just to
Correct.
be
Thank
clear
you.
on that. So that's why there's sort of like, what does this expanded mean? It needs to get it to 25,000 square feet. Correct?
Correct. So I want to start, we'll start with Cole and Ustick. This is our, start with our current facility, start with Cole and Ustick. This is one of the locations that we own. It was construction in 2019, I'm sorry, 2009. And I want to call your attention to the appendix on page 10. So one of the things we asked group 4 is to look at all the systems in this building and think about that replacement cycle for them. So as you can see, we've got the size of this location, when the roof was done, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and does it have an adequate fire system? So they've listed in this table on page 10, all the systems that are in that facility, the year that they were acquired, the expected life cycle, and then the project replacement year. So you can see at Cole and Ustick, it's almost 20 years old, and they've got some recommendations in terms of things that we should be planning for that we need to continue to invest in those buildings. So the one that really leapt out at me, we need to, first I need to understand the fire alarm, which is still listed here as 2024 replacement, but the roof on that location, 2029. So this work, and we've got these pages for every location, is really important for our public works team so that they are able to start looking at that in terms of their workload. And then it's also very important for our finance team in terms of looking at how are we funding that continued investment in these beautiful libraries. I think that was the #1 recommendation of group 4 was to continue, keep your current facilities up to date. So we've got pages for all of these of our current locations. So you see Cole and Ustick here. The other thing that group 4 did was some estimates based on their recommendations for what we call that refresh. And this is in addition to, this is different than sort of, the making sure that the HVAC works and the roof works, but these were the pieces that were identified as potential investments that would make that building more functional. Particularly, I think you might remember this from the major report, places where we've got some sound issues, or if we wanted to flip where the children's section was located, these would make that building more functional and more flexible for the public.
But to be clear, we're not adding square footage.
We are not
This
adding square footage.
footprint is not changing.
This does not change the footprint. There's no there's no recommended plan to increase the size of Cole and Ustick or Bound Crossing. You will keep them at that same square footage in this plan. And this is where you can see, using local estimates, that's about a $75 square foot investment for that building size. A contingency of 10 to 15%, sort of the public works standard. There's the hard construction costs, soft construction costs, which include the design, contract, permits. We're looking at the escalation costs for some of those over time. And that is a different escalation cost than some of the ongoing furniture, fixtures, equipment that we'll also be making sure that we're building into our budgets. So this was when I talked in August about how important it was to have Public Works and Lindsay really co-leading this with the library, is because we want to make sure that the sort of technical aspect is accounted for, and we're able to start using some of this in our planning for those years where we've got time with our current locations, but that'll sneak up on us faster than we realize. So same thing, we've got one for Bound Crossing. You can see the Bound Crossing list on page 12. There, this is a younger building, so that replacement cycle is further out on much of the components of it. But again, it's really important to have them tracked. So I know, and then Hollister Branch, these ones are interesting for group 4 to do. You can see from that slide. Sorry, it's a little hard to see from here. But there are some things that it is a leased facility, and there are things that are the responsibility of the landlord. And then there are things where we have a shared responsibility as well. So in some of the electrical, plumbing, mechanical, and even in the roof, in some cases, we do have a shared responsibility. So while the list may not be quite as long, we are also needing to factor in particularly the things inside the building. As you might remember, we were responsible for the beautiful, floor here at Hillcrest. It was done while we leased the building, but because it's our floor in it, that's considered a tenant improvement. It was our responsibility. Same thing here with Hillcrest. And then downtown, we have this one. I think we're still doing some of the work. As you know, there was a recommendation from Group 4 to really look at moving our technical services team out of downtown. We're kind of in a little chicken or the egg because we don't know where they go. If we move them out, they do need to go somewhere. So we're sort of trying to think about how we might approach that cost exercise. But do have that as something we want to continue to look at. Any questions on that work on our current facilities?
We don't have cost estimates on anything except for Coal and Stick, and we have Bound up there too.
We do have Bound. I didn't do it.
Okay.
We have it. I didn't put it in because I thought this slide presentation would.
Do we have any, like, has there, because if you look at like the years on each of these, like you'll see, it looks like for Coal and Stick, kind of the year where things start coming up pretty consistently is 2029.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for Bound with like 2036. I imagine downtown library, it seems like that's probably more all over the place, but it seems 2033 is kind of 2032. Have we done any type of have we tried to factor some of that information into these sequencing scenarios, or was this stuff done after we did the sequencing scenarios?
It's not factored into the sequencing scenarios because the sequencing scenarios are about the expansion, and these are about keeping your systems up to date.
Okay.
And you're right. You can see that acquired list, or the column hasn't acquired. So when that system was put in place, and then the expected life cycle, most of them are 20 years, sometimes 15, sometimes 25. Fire suppression was 80 years at Bound Crossing, which I think is a great investment. So yeah, you absolutely can see 20 years after after Coal and Stick opens, then we've got to have some of those system replacements. How we're considering.
And just to add to that, when we are budgeting for the sequencing, that is more capital improvement, capital funding. When it comes to deferred maintenance, that's my team's responsibility with asset management, and they're the ones that are projecting these replacements based on these dates and the life of the equipment. So that's an MRM funded. So that's kind of budgeted differently, just not to muddy the waters, but to clarify on that.
Any other questions to this point?
Can I just, I think on the downtown, if the year has already passed and projected, does that mean it was not done, or like there's a heater exchanger 2009, there's 2016?
Yeah, we'll probably need to update this list based on the project that's about to happen, because we're finishing up with a big bulk of the deferred maintenance. So these items are probably getting addressed, but to answer the question, we have put off a lot of work in the downtown library, so we're catching up now. But yeah, we can get that updated.
And how does it seemed like when we funded the maintenance for downtown library, there was an expectation that this would extend the life of the library maybe another decade. Is that changed by anything in this analysis, or do we still believe that we have, I don't know, 7 to 10 years at that location with the investment that we're making now?
So you're asking if the investments at the downtown library are extending the life a certain amount of time?
Yes, and if this analysis changed any of those,
No,
any
no,
of that information.
no. The work that we're doing now, like we have a 30-year roof, right? And then there's always going to be consistent updating and maintenance operations types things for all of our facilities. But yeah, the goal with the work that we're doing is to extend the life of that library for another 15, 20 years. There are recommendations in the plan for, as Jessica alluded to, moving ATS out to have more usable square footage. But you can see like the site compared to the other sites, it's still pretty constrained in all the things that we can do on an urban site like that. So we'll have to look at that a little more.
And I do think to your point, why this looks all over the place is because after, there was such deferred maintenance on the building, rightly, it was gonna be torn down. They didn't invest, and so starting really in 21 is when those investments started happening with the new roof. And I think to Lindsay's point, once that first floor is done, these numbers will shift pretty.
I think the question I'm asking is in the same way that there a ticking time bomb at the downtown library in 7 or 10 years, or is what the investments we're doing now give us more flexibility than maybe council was under the impression of?
I believe so.
Yeah, for sure.
Move on to budget. Okay. So this is the expanded or new facilities. So we looked at or did some estimates of what it would be if you took the current Hollister and Hillcrest and expanded this. So this is not purchasing land. This is really finding a larger lease space. So this is, sorry.
I was gonna say, this is the 25,000 square feet is,
Yeah.
that is the goal, maybe estimate. These dollars are based on a 25,000 square foot facility. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is to repurpose a leased facility.
Correct. Using it, replacing Hollister Hillcrest with a larger leased facility.
Well, don't show me the new.
I'm sorry, it's in the slide.
That just seems extraordinary number, given that you're using an existing facility.
To be clear, we're not talking about taking the existing Hillcrest, this space, and we're talking about moving out of this space into a new leased space.
In the vicinity,
somewhere in the area, and taking a shell of a space and making it a library.
So
And
is the assumption that it's empty inside, it's just 4 walls and a roof, and everything else is to be determined?
The key word is assumption, right? This is like, we are kind of doing worst case scenario planning, but this is why the nervousness of putting numbers out, because you probably are scribbling this down and wanting to hold us to it. But these are estimates, and these are based on the cost estimates we've been doing with Group 4, as well as gut checking with our local contracting partners as far as costing goes. So that's why it's being constrained.
The other reason that we're being conservative in this is because of that $25 million project voter requirement. I don't want us to be planning for something, trying, to like, okay, let's make it so that we're under that. And then all of a sudden something, becomes much more expensive in a way we didn't expect. That's why we've got that contingency. Because, I think that intent of the voters wanting to have more say in the library project, we need to really honor that and not try to have smaller projects that are just trying to squeak in at $23.4 million and hope nothing happens. That to us was a real, we sat down and talked about how do we make sure we're factoring in the right costs. That's why we also, like a library, our read of that is all the things that would need to make that library an actual project that you could walk into, which is why we've added the additional collection. That's why we've made sure we've got furniture, fixtures, and equipment added. So that, you everything that you would need on day one for people to walk in and use it as a library.
And it's either or, right? It's not expanded college.
Correct. It is either or. That's a good clarification.
Does this, it doesn't look like it does, but does this factor in lease payments to a landlord?
That we have that no, this doesn't factor that into, we think that's an ongoing cost. And so we would need to also, I think to your point, we would, in additional those one-time capital costs, we would then need to make sure we've got the M&O, the maintenance operation costs, so that increased rent, additional staffing. If we've got a staffing model that is for library of a certain size, if we're increasing it, we need to make sure we're adding location staff, and admin is more sort of support staff. That larger collection, increased programming costs, and then obviously building in the repair maintenance equipment.
One reason I was asking is, I think we talked about, and maybe this is something we need legal to look at, is whether those lease payments are part of the project expenses or not, because then that might, I don't know how to factor it in, but that might be something that we could clarify. And then I just had, sorry, one more. So is that 13 million then pretty much tenant improvements, like
Correct.
what we would need to put in as tenant to make it a library?
Correct.
Help me. I mean, $4.5 million in soft construction costs. Like, is most of that design? That just seems really high for a tenant improvement designs. But maybe on.
Yeah, that takes into account design professional to do the drawings, any other random contracts, say we have to do asbestos abatement or testing for hazardous materials, permitting through the city to get approval. We just sometimes have other miscellaneous contracts, moving potentially, if we're going to be moving from one branch to another. That's an expense as well. You saw the feet we went through on the downtown library. So yeah, that has a lot of components to it. We didn't list them all out for clarity.
Questions on this slide?
So here's our estimate for a new standalone. So this is where we added that land cost. This is based on, so the city has a real estate.
He is our strategic real estate manager.
Strategic real estate manager, who we asked if we're looking for like find us some current for sale 5-acre lots, which would allow us to put that 25 to 30,000 square foot library. Their estimate was 3.9 million. The hard construction costs for that building that size, same structure of how we came to estimate what that would be. New standalone somewhere in the 31 to 32 million in today's dollars.
You say the square footage was on
So any of the buildings, the square footage would be that minimum 25,000 square footage, which was what Route 4 recommended.
Yeah.
And I think looking at our current locations and knowing that we need additional space, I think it is a good number for us for future branch locations.
So you were saying 25 to 30,000.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is 25, because I mean,
Yeah.
25 is different than 30 in terms of
Yeah, you're right.
the number
Jessica,
25.
it was 30,000.
Oh, it is 30?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
30,000.
30,000. Thank you, Chloe, for the clarification. And again, so at this point, same thing, we'd also, as Lindsay pointed out, there is the capital budget, and then there'd also need to be the M&O budget. These would be, since we wouldn't be expanding, these would be all new staff collection. And then we looked at a new lease branch. So this would be where we wouldn't have some of the ability to bring in items from a current location, a current Hollister location. So you see increase in the collection size, increase in the furniture and fixtures, and we wouldn't actually have any cost savings in that.
This is also 30,000.
Yeah, they're all 30,000. I just had the wrong number, and Zoe did a very nice job correcting. And same thing, so indirect costs. All right. That is where we are in our estimates.
Questions, comments?
And I feel like this is probably all branch specific. But if we are going to do anything with downtown, and I think even 15, 20 years out, like we have to start thinking about it really, really early.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That is the work that we did this first, and we'll start in looking at downtown.
Okay.
We do have that interesting, where do we put ATS question, but we'll probably come up with some scenarios on
At what point does like citing come into, like, because it may be unrealistic to, like, let's say Hollister, for example, we want to go into a 30,000 square foot facility. We think we like the lease approach. I mean, it may just be in the general vicinity of where we would want to site that, or even a new library for that matter. Like finding a 5-acre parcel may not be realistic where we're wanting to go. At what point does like siting come into this analysis? Because I mean, we can say yes on, like in our meeting, we might get real aggressive and say yes, we want to do all these things, but like it may be impractical in the parts of town that we want to do this to find a lease facility or find a 5-acre parcel. How do we think about that?
Well, typically, yeah, I mean, we're doing master planning for the facility and also for other departments, right? And so once we get council approval on the facility plan and come to an agreement on how we're approaching this, that approval would then set into place Adon, who's our strategic real estate manager, more aggressively looking. And of course, funding would be necessary as well. But I mean, we're constantly looking for spaces, sites, that type of thing. But until we have that approval, we can't get into that due diligence portion of procuring a property or a site.
And I do think that the ordinance not speaking to the co-location is challenging for us, because that is also just a great option for us to be on the bottom floor of something. So that, I think, when I think about, you mentioned earlier, like what would be the request for council in revisiting the ordinance, having some clarity on that as an option, I think would give us, particularly in some of the areas where we do have a density, we want to, have that option. I'd like to see us think about how we can take that possibility.
Do you anticipate prior to our meeting in October having any additional information about downtown? I could see us. I mean, I haven't talked to council about this openly, but I could see trepidation in approving a facilities plan, that we have without having dealt with the issue of downtown, even if that is years and years away.
We can have more. We've got the tool that we're working in. We can have more information on that for.
So I want to you know, as I look at these estimates in terms of costs, I'm a little bit concerned about this going from 25 to 30,000 square feet in terms of the, plus in almost all those cases in the new standalone, that's what will jump us above 25 if we were to buy it today, build it today. And so, you know, that's still more than 10, that's 10,000 square feet bigger than Colby's. That's a pretty decent, it's almost not quite twice as much. 30,000 is twice as big as Colby's. That's a pretty big jump and automatically gets us over the $25 million. And again, I'm with you. I don't want to risk a situation where it's, you know, comes in at 24.7 million and, you know, by the time it's built, it's over 25 or 90. Or you're just, you know, basically trying to skirt the law. But you know, there's also the reality of building anything for under $25 million that, you know, I think, I'm not sure that the voters wanted to, we're passing a proposition to say we never want another Boise public library. I think they were frankly upset about the $130 million library that was proposed, and this was their response to it. You know, 25 million they thought was an appropriate price tag to build an appropriate size of library, not. Yes,
But then why put in specific control limit, 25,000 and 25 million, right? It wasn't just the last proposal was really expensive. It's that they wanted to put a control mechanism in
absolutely.
place on top of it.
I completely understand that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that perhaps we don't need to make it 30,000 square foot building if it means that it's going to jump it above the 25 million and therefore nothing can be built as a standalone, which is what we've got going on right now. There's no scenario in which you can have a standalone building, as I see it.
Yeah, and I don't think that decreasing the square footage on a new standalone. We're looking at 31 to 32 million, so I don't think that goes lower. Yeah, I think you were looking at one of the least options.
In Bound and Pole and U-Stick look kind of small, probably look big. Proposals were being drawn up to build those facilities, and they're small.
And just a reminder, you know, the Bound and Pole and U-Stick, the other branches came about from a master plan that was done in 2000, right? And here we are in 2025 doing an updated one. We've experienced a lot of growth, so the recommendation of 25,000, 30,000 is a response to the growth we've experienced. So I just want to point that out because it does look like, wow, we are making a lot larger libraries, but we're
Serving a lot more people.
or providing a lot more programming with a lot more flexibility. So that's the increase.
And as Lindsay was pointed out earlier, those two standalones were built with that. We had the land purchased and holding on to it for a long time. That is not an option.
So
we
essentially,
have to figure out how to be creative.
so essentially with the new ordinance, it's unlikely that we will be able to build anything as a new standalone. So we're really talking about refurbishing and or leasing a facility.
Without a
Even
vote.
leasing a new facility is not.
Without a vote.
I would
Without a vote, yeah.
I would just add that, I mean, we're not gonna be able to come up with any of these figures at the city without some type of bond or levy. So you're going to have to go to the voters at some point anyway. These numbers are just too high.
Thank you, that's helpful.
And I think we are. I'm not ignoring the difficulty. It's pretty obvious to all of us after looking at the language, but we ought to have some do the right thing spirit of trying to take forward the proposal.
Yeah, and I would add, the board to consider when they're making a recommendation to council. I know Jessica mentioned the co-locating, adding some language on that, but then really just approaching this system-wide. And that's not clear, and that would be helpful for if we are to go to a vote. We need to look at this. It's not a standalone one location, it's a system-wide.
I'll just offer this, and this is maybe more for the public than for you folks. I would often joke, I think I told this joke to Jessica once. When 2019 happened, I said, why do we have a proposal for $100 million library? We have $101 million libraries. And but it was this idea that like our lease at these facilities is about $100,000 a year in that ballpark. You have 10-year lease for $1 million. There's great savings in there, not recognizing these tenant improvements are almost just as expensive as a new library itself. I would say I'm just kind of I have some sticker shock at that, and I kind of saw that as an escape valve for
At the tenant.
yes.
Yeah, I shared your shot.
And I kind of saw that as an escape valve that for us in getting out of some of these tougher conversations, and especially with my reassurance of folks that are advocating for expanded library services in West Boise. I don't think these are figures that I personally or council have reckoned with. That we're going to have to think about, like this is a tough pill to swallow on even what it would cost for a lease facility.
Although this is a 30,000 square feet.
I mean, if you said
But that's
we need to
still
do a
very-
$10 million in tenant improvements, I would still be thinking levy. I mean, the levy that we're doing this year, the 2-year levy is in that ballpark.
So I think to that point, we can, in our October meeting, have some more details on those hard construction costs. We can do a little bit more itemization, because you're right, we all have sticker shock on that. But I think having some of the components so you can see a little bit more of how those were put together. We can bring that. Because if you're all having, we've all, like, Lindsay and I have looked at that spreadsheet so much that we really understand it, and we'll make sure that you guys have a chance to look at detail.
So this is really, I don't have a sense of how the city works. In terms of what is, I do like the idea of a system-wide approach to go to the voters with, but how big a number are they? Do you think it's realistic? Get no sense of that. If $10 million isn't going to buy us a heck of a lot of anything, and yet a system-wide $80 million, $100 million plus the bonding, and we get 67% of the voters to vote for a system-wide bond that is it's $80 million. I have some questions as to what they vote for him. Yeah. Again, not having looked at what's happened in the past and how big it's been. So you've got the history on that. There's a system-wide of increasing Hillcrest, increasing Hollister, and doing something for West Boise seems to me that's the kind of figures, plus maintenance on the existing standalones. I think you're looking at those numbers at least up to $100 million. That's a lot of burden on people's property taxes that they may or may not, even if it's bonded, they may or may not be willing to go. It'd be helpful to have some sense of that before we say, yeah, we love this plan, but it's all pie in the sky, so who cares anyways? It's really a sign or just an observation.
Well, I think historically, the city of Boise has not passed a bond for a library. They passed one levy, which was in 1972, that allowed for the purchase of the Salt Lake City hardware building. I don't, other than that, and I'm happy to look at some historically what's been put to the voters and what happened with it. But I don't have, you know, I know very little about it, but I'm happy to bring it up. That would be an interesting people.
Not that that isn't an important consideration, but I'm struggling a little bit with, I almost feel like what we really need to do is, I think, be mindful of costs, but what is best for the system and make that case to voters. And I mean, if they say no, that's sort of out of our control. But the question for us is really, based on all this analysis that's been done, what is the need for the library? I mean, I don't think there's any way we can make it less than getting it. It doesn't look like. So I think it's, you know, be mindful of the costs and be really thoughtful about what that is. But I don't know that I don't think there's much of a proposal we could even come up with that looks like that doesn't hit the city or that possibly sounds like levy or bond for our.
So the only other observation I would say is whether or not we're talking about Hillcrest and Hollister expansions, or we're talking about Civil West Boise, it seems to me that it's more sellable to the public writ large if it is a multi-purpose facility where you're saying, okay, we're going to address a new fire station and a new library and find your multiple purposes versus just a standalone library. I could be wrong. I think there's that sense that, you know, the efficiency of co-locating things is more appealing to, I would just say, me as a voter, as a property owner, the taxpayer. It seems to me that's a more advantageous way to go. It's more complicated, but if you also the city council simultaneously looking, oh, and we also need a new fire station in X location, and we're also trying to do low-income housing there, or whatever other facilities you're contemplating simultaneously. It seems to me that as you're considering a vote of the public, it'd be nice to be able to say this is serving multiple interests, and your interest may be more in the fire station than in the library, but I can see the reason why you're doing this all.
I think for council's that as well. And types of things that pop into my mind are affordable housing. You put this on the main floor of a dense development, and then I also start, when I see numbers like this, I also start thinking about what are partnership opportunities. So GBAD, I mean, they're looking for their next big project. Other opportunities with partner organizations like them, CCDC and others, that might help defray some of these costs and also increase the value of some type of public offering that's being put out.
In the interest of time, since I know you still have to, I want to talk a little bit about the joint work session with council. So here's the draft agenda that I have put together, and wanted to run it by you. I'll obviously be working with council, city, and board leadership on putting this more detail. But I think part of my goal is to really review the facility plan and what we put together. I want to make sure we really have visibility on some of the pieces that are around our current facilities and how that'll be used by Public Works. Obviously review the key findings and the recommendations, and then we do need to have I think a joint discussion about the factors for any implementation, particularly with an understanding on this requirement to go to the voters and how we approach that.
So I just want to acknowledge before we move on to the next topic, all of the emails and comments that we've heard from the desire for a West Boise branch. And I would say for myself, I speak on behalf of everybody. We have heard and we understand the concerns and desires, and you know, there's, as you can see, there are lots of issues that had to grapple with whether we're talking about a new facility for that part of town or even maintaining the facilities we have now. So just want you to know, we've heard you, we're not ignoring you. We appreciate your interest in your local libraries and your desire to have one in the part of town. You all live in. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next, if there's any, unless there's other questions, comments, observations.
We're not gonna do any investment.
Right, so we have essentially, I mean, we can either approve the proposal as it's presented. We can take no action. We can reject the proposal as it's presented. Or we just move to discuss it again, take it up when we need to with the city council.
I know I'm not voting on this, but just from my clarification, if you're approving the master plan, like what are you approving? What are you agreeing to? What are you directing staff to do?
We're asking for endorsement. There's a in the report from Group 4, there is a blank page that they have identified for endorsement. And that is something that is kind of standard for when they do facility plans. Then the board gets off and the board, the idea is with the board want to endorse it. So that would be what we're have as an action item as outlined. This is something that we can continue to discuss. We can have this complete without endorsement from the board. It really is a discussion that you don't have to have.
And is the thing we're endorsing Plan A, B, or C?
No, it's just endorsing that that this report reflects the recommendations of Group 4, and you would like as a board to move forward with discussing further and work to try to have one of those recommendations enacted or a different recommendation.
And to be clear, the Group 4 proposal does not preclude the addition of a facility of one sort or another in West Boise.
Let me ask the question if I may. Would it be possible to endorse it or not after the working session with the city? I just feel like we may benefit from that input. And yeah, like for example, if there's no way would we ever want to submit a vote, we may need to go back and rework things or ask more questions. I just think there might be some outcome from that. And then I think I mentioned this before. I like the idea of more directly addressing the input from the West Boise folks somewhere. And we talked about maybe it's, we've received this input, what would the sequencing look like to more directly address that? I don't know if other people have similar thoughts, but when I read it, it just, considering the amount of direct input we got, I feel like we need to more directly at least address it. I know it's in there.
Okay.
And like, so when we talk, we know where and how it's in there. I think it could be a paragraph in there, kind of narrative, even how we're looking at that.
We did not go back to Group 4 after the August meeting, and we'd be happy to do that if there's specific questions you'd like them to revisit.
So to me, maybe we would do that after the working session with council. And then, like if that's, I mean, I'm curious everyone else and all of that too. But just to leave room for if there are things that come out of that discussion that we want them to look at more specifically and then endorse it.
So you're suggesting take no action today?
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
But totally open to other feedback. I'm not super set.
Ashma? Yes,
I would say consider give that time and then come back to it. Yeah, so the recommendation is after following the October 14th work session, we might also have more information on what's possible with the work.
Bring it back up in the November.
Well, and it may be good for us to try coming out of that city council meeting to have, we want for the board to look at these things so that we can have that in November. I mean, I don't want to keep delaying.
Yeah, yeah, no, we can.
This is a 20, want to make sure we get it right. It's going to be living with it for a while.
Okay.
And to be clear, it's not as if, I mean, the budget for next year is set. It's not like we're talking about, oh my God, we got a time frame, we got to hit it so that it can be in next year's budget. We've already made it. Also, it's already looking at it. Okay. So
Start October.
right. So we're really looking.
Yeah.
Time, an extra month is. All right, so
That's
I
good.
don't, I don't think we need to make a vote on it. We just, that's the
No action.
consensus of the group. Okay, very good. Then moving on to new business, we need to select the meeting dates for fiscal year 2026. Saw before you some proposed dates. Does anybody have any issues with any of those dates? Anybody wants to recommend different dates, different sequence?
Still the same basic methodology,
Second Wednesday of every month is what we're looking at. It's still, I mean, we have a number of new board members since we did this last year. Want to make sure that those Wednesdays are like, oh my God, every Wednesday is a problem.
You will also notice, so in the packet on page 6, we have the FY 26 meeting cadence. So what are you guys doing on those sort of monthly meetings? And then I do believe, and I'm not exactly sure what page it's on, but we also have identified which locations, yeah, sorry, page 38. So in addition to the meeting dates, we've identified what location that meeting will be at, and we will try to make sure that in that meeting, when we send you the packet, that we highlight for you where you'll be going, because we will be moving around all year.
And I would say to Carrie, maybe the day of the meeting, a reminder email to us that this is for meeting at next location. All right. Hearing that, can I have a motion to approve the proposed schedule dates and location?
So
Second.
Second.
Carrie?
Johnson,
Yes.
Kamal,
Yes.
Slang,
Yes.
Pantera,
yes,
Kuzinski,
Yes.
favor,
Okay. Then the next item is the adoption of amendment appeal. Review of the policies and procedures, and this is the annual time when we look through everything. There's no proposed changes.
So the bylaws is what, so happy to say there was no policy that you needed to review this month. As you know, we keep you sort of on a track for that. So we were able to get that wrapped up in August's meeting. But by statute, you do need to review the bylaws on an annual basis. Please start on page 39. There is, as you may remember, since they were amended last year, a different process for amending the bylaws that requires sort of a 30-day review, publishing of those, since that was deemed to not be necessary, since you guys did a lot of work on it last year. They're just in the packet for your review.
Still look beautiful to me this year.
All right, then the next item is the election of officers. Sort of did this as on a temporary basis last month, 2 months ago. And I would propose it on a permanent basis for the fiscal year 2026. We retain the president and vice president. On the other hand, I would entertain any other nominations if you would prefer.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Hearing no, I mean,
Yeah,
I would have to make a motion for that position, so.
I think we need to do them individually, so, or,
How do you want me to vote? Move to take a vote for the current president and vice president to serve the 1-year term beginning October 2025.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, roll call.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kamal.
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Kentara. Yes. Kuzinski.
Yes,
All in favor, motion carried.
very good.
thank you both.
Nikki, are you willing to do the vouchers for the next month?
Yep.
Okay.
And I know that'll be longer, so if you have any, like, if we need to send out.
Carrie just sent us past it, Esther.
That's great. She keeps us on.
No, I appreciate it.
Yes, we do. We all do.
So, and the next board meeting is, as you recall, on October 14th with the city council, and we won't conduct any of our regular business. Full meeting devoted to the joint work session. So, next regular meeting will be November 12th. Remind me where that one will be, Carrie.
That one will be at Full and Houston.
Olin Houston. Very
And
good.
joint work session with council will be in council chambers.
Aside from reviewing whatever gets sent out and the things we have, is there anything specific we need to do? For the October session.
We, will send a packet for you
Okay.
that'll have,
Okay.
the agenda. And
Okay.
if some of the things that we're gonna look at result in, some, materials, support materials, we'll put those in the packet.
Great, thank you.
All right. Is there any other business before the board? Hearing none. In a motion to adjourn,
Move we adjourn the meeting?
Okay.
right? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Sorry, this was a little longer than normal, but I think it was important to go through all of this.